So this is going to be a great topic. We have an excellent group of panelists here. Brooks Borcherding, Senior Vice President for Enterprise and Carrier Services, Business Services at Time Warner Cable Business Class. James Walker, VP, Managed Services for Tata Communications. Matthias Hain, Director of Data Services for Colt Technology Services based in Europe. And Steve Shaw, Director of Product Marketing for SDN at Juniper Networks. So really delighted to have the group of panelists here. And what I wanted to do here is just highlight a few of the topics and share a bit about, or just kind of frame up the discussion and then hand it off to Brooks. So the topics that we'll cover are the cloud service models, just really briefly. Where are we with cloud adoption? The network's role in assuring the service experience, integrating the network with the cloud, and then some of the service provider initiatives around this much more dynamic environment that is enabled by the network. So if we just look at it briefly, just as a real quick look at the cloud services models, you've got basically 3 different types of models that we're dealing with here. We have the public cloud, which is multi-tenant, riding on top of the internet, with some comparative advantages that are widely recognized in terms of service time to market, the agility, the scalability, and cost efficiency, being able to leverage the multi-tenant aspects there. Then we have the private cloud option, network-enabled on-premises or hosted, where you've got advantages in terms of the performance and visibility on an end-to-end basis, resiliency, security and control. And then, of course, the hybrid option, a hybrid public cloud and private cloud option where you get the best of both worlds. So that's just kind of framing the discussion here. And then I'm going to hand it over to Brooks, who's going to take us through his perspective on this network-enabled environment.
I'm Brooks Borcherding with Navisite Time Warner Cable. I came to Time Warner Cable through the Navisite acquisition about 3 years ago. So I was the president and CEO of Navisite at that time. We go back quite a ways with providing cloud services, so we're a cloud services provider as a company, one of the original cloud services provider in that space. And I think it'd bring a little bit of a different perspective to this discussion, kind of representing cloud usage from the commercial perspective versus the network side. So would like to entertain that kind of dialogue as we go through this. Where we are, even though it's been about 5 years in, I would say using Everett Rogers' technology adoption lifecycle is that it's still really early days. So when you look at the cloud workloads that have actually migrated, we're probably only just past the chasm, really in that regard. So there's a long way to go here. There's a lot still to take place. We're going to move into full production in different use cases, as you mentioned, private and public and hybrid private and public type of adoption. And the network is becoming more and more essential to that. So with Time Warner Cable, we're EMF Carrier Ethernet 2.0 certified. Those are really going to be a key enabler for customers that'll enable their adoption of cloud services. So it's not only the robustness of the infrastructure, but it's the service levels that we can then guarantee. It's the ability to go end to end from the premise out to the cloud and back. That's going to be key to that. It's the whole Ethernet transformation that we're going through with this adoption, and the change of network topology going from really a mesh network to back to a hub and spoke concept to get to the data center and back. So regardless of if it's a private cloud or a public cloud type of adoption. So I think we're going to enter a really interesting phase as we go into this kind of second phase of rapid adoption of cloud services for customers, and I think it's going to be a really interesting, industry to participate in together as we look to solve a lot of these problems. And that Lumos presentation was excellent, by the way. So thank you for that. You hit on a lot of the key topics. So instead of boring you with PowerPoint, I'm going to bore you with a marketing video if we have that. I'm going to show you an early adopter of our cloud services, AAA. Pretty interesting use case. I apologize for a little bit of the marketing orientation of this, but there's some interesting use cases there of how they talk about that adoption and also the leveraging of the network for their use.
When somebody calls at 3 o'clock in the morning and they're on a country road and they're broken down, they need to know that if they call us, we will send a truck for them. AAA is a 109-year-old brand that encompasses multiple business lines in Western Central New York. We offer traditional AAA services, travel insurance, but we also offer automobile repair, we offer driving instruction, so really we cover a breadth of industries. The principal thing that we're known for, though, is road service.
Requests for road service come in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So obviously our members expect us to be available and ready to help them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We run on technology, we communicate through technology, so it has to be available. So we need not only have equipment, but people who understand the equipment, keep it serviceable 100% of the time. We had a company that was built on a technology platform that had aged. I think it's a standard problem for a lot of companies. The business gets ahead of the technology because technology represents cost. And we were at a point in time where our reliability and our ability to service our members was, in my mind, threatened.
What we were looking for was somebody that could help us, somebody who had bench strength, who could supplement the things that we were good at, somebody who could provide us best-in-class technology, best-in-class processes, best-in-class people. Navisite for us rose to the top of that list very quickly.
We use Navisite as our primary data center for all of our business applications. Email, our membership system, our road service system, our travel system, pretty much everything we do as a business. But we also use the NaviCloud, where our applications are just virtualized, and Navisite worries all about the details about how those servers are running, and what we do is we deliver the service to our people.
To date, once the applications have moved to Navisite, we have benefited from greatly enhanced service availability. I no longer need to have premium level database engineers. I no longer need to have top shelf network engineers. I can rely upon Navisite to provide me those services.
And the fact that Navisite and Time Warner Cable were coming together as one entity at the time was very attractive to us also, because we now have a solution that is 100% provided by Time Warner Cable family that now includes Navisite.
It was a single provider, providing us WAN connectivity, providing us data center services. Through Navisite's data center, I know that my data is being backed up. I know that my data is secure. I know that my environment is secure. And at the end of the day, that investment allows me to provide 24/7 support for our members around the things that they expect us to do.
So, when you look at that, I think that's a classic case of the adoption of cloud from a customer perspective. A mid-sized company, it's impossible for them to really keep up with the evolution of pace of the underlying technology to support their business. And yes, it is outsourcing, as was referenced before. In the classic way, I really refer to as out-tasking, because they're actually looking for specific opportunities to move critical workloads in and out of their enterprise, seamlessly in that regard. So I think there's great benefit to them from that perspective, but as I said, I think the future still lies ahead of us.
Thank you, Stan, and also welcome from my side to the MEF Gen Ethernet conference. What I would like to add to the panel discussion here is to share a bit of an approach how Colt provides or addresses the needs of customers for moving into the cloud and adopting cloud IT services. So a sure service experience, that's one of the key areas which we heard a lot this morning when bringing network and IT services, cloud services together. Before I do that, just a few introduction about what is actually Colt doing. Who is Colt? We are European-based, having a pan-European network operating 42 metropolitan area networks across Europe. So we are connecting customer buildings directly on our fiber. We have more than 20,000 buildings connected, and on top of that, we have also quite a unique coverage of data centers directly connected to our network in Europe. 436 data centers directly connected, and this is a kind of a good basis for bringing really the two sides of the cloud IT adoption together, which is the network as well as the IT services needlessly together, and then making sure that the customer gets the right service experience, what he expected to get. So network footprint in Europe, and what we have launched now as a new service offering, a new service proposition as part of our Ethernet, but not only Ethernet portfolio, I will come back to that later, is the dedicated cloud access option. So what does it mean, and what is actually the driver for it? So why does it matter? Why does the network matter when you have a cloud IT environment in front of you to apply or adopt it in your organization? Well, it's not anymore just longer email services or a bit of storage you are using out of the cloud. No, you're really moving more and more business critical applications, workflow applications, which really impacting your business performance, your business efficiency into your cloud platform. So therefore, the poor connectivity is directly then impacting the service experience, the user experience of the IT application. And basically, on top of the service experience, also the agility of the cloud consumption, the IT consumption is or needs to be basically applied to the network element as well. Finally, more and more IT applications are consumed, and this is not only one cloud provider you need to connect to. There are more, several. So we have application or platform as a service, so infrastructure provider. We have software application provider as a service you want to connect to. And well, at the end, you end up with quite a couple of connectivity needs you have. So what Colt thought about is, well, we have all these assets in terms of we have the reach and the connectivity to the cloud providers themselves, because they are using connectivity between their locations on data centers anyhow. So for replication, for load sharing, for resiliency needs. And therefore, we have now signed up to a list of cloud providers directly, and we are partners of them for private connectivity. So it's actually this list here, you see Amazon, Microsoft Azure, VMware, they are not coming from the private cloud or for the hybrid cloud approach. They're actually coming from the public cloud architecture. So what they see is actually that the connectivity need is also moving to a more reliable, foreseeable, scalable demand on the connectivity side, and therefore they're providing an alternative to just accessing the cloud IT via the internet. So what we are doing is basically bringing the two parties together, the cloud service providers on one hand and the customers on the other hand. And we are allowing that a user just need to connect once with a network, with a dedicated network, and having then the choice simply to select from one or more cloud services they want to consume. So, and when we're talking about connectivity and private versus public connectivity and how to assure the service experience, well, as I mentioned, it starts from you have your internet connection however you have it. So whatever is there, you're using. And this is moving now to several variations. Enhanced internet, and this is what we have used by having direct peerings set up where the cloud providers are connected to, and also running, of course, a quality of service mechanism across that, which is not really easy to achieve when you have a public internet access. You need to make sure that the whole end-to-end traffic flow is not going out of your network domain, of your IP domain. So, but what is more important and what we see from the cloud providers with all their private connectivity offerings or options they bring out is that they see that these typical corporate network services, IPVPN, based on MPLS services or architectures, and all the Ethernet flavors, Ethernet point-to-point connectivities, Ethernet private networks, or multi-point ELAN services, or even a dedicated optical connectivity is on offer. So then what else is needed is the orchestration so that the network and the connectivity need can follow the consumption approach. And what we have today on the service wrap is that a customer gets onto an order portal, place the order for a connectivity into Amazon, Microsoft, VMware, whatever. And the sales model as well is the customer of a cloud service comes to Colt and places the order for the connectivity. Commercially, we're still a bit in the way of, and we heard a lot about APIs needs to bring the OSS, BSS environment together with the network and elements are that we're having static contracts somehow. We have flexibility that the customer can change bandwidth somehow in a short term, in a more or less instant, or in a short-term temporary approach. But what is more required and expected finally is that a customer can not just place an order, he can actually connect instantly to one of the cloud services by setting up a virtual connection, an ELAN, an E-line, whatever, VPN connectivity. And also the sales approach will be then that it's not just the carrier, the network carrier who is offering the connectivity element. No, it will go that the cloud provider themselves are offering the connectivity elements directly from themselves by just sending their customer onto a portal, onto the orchestration environment of connectivity. And finally, and we need to have a lot of standardization work to be finished and supported by MEF and others, so that we have this consumption-driven approach, bandwidth on demand, instant click to connect, really supported here. So with this vision, this is what we're working on and what we are expecting all the vendors and suppliers to support us here. I will stop here and will join back to the panel. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Steve Shaw. I'm with Juniper Networks. I wanted to start with this slide because I think there's two interesting points in here. Yes, it's a marketing slide, and I'm in marketing, so I feel comfortable using it. But I think there's something very important happening here, and certainly one of the themes that's come out of the speakers before me is the idea of connecting your ideas. And so to me, the first thing there is it's your idea. It's your vision. It's what you want to do with the network. If I dream that I want a drop-down screen over my video, as the man from Comcast was talking about, that's the vision. We need to enable that. It's about the network becoming personal. How do I connect what I want to do? It might be a personal service, something that I use in my own home. It might be that I have a vision for a multi-connected dynamic WAN environment for my business offices around the world. Whatever that idea is, it's your idea, and Juniper wants to be there to work with you to make that happen. The other is connected. Obviously, Juniper is a networking company, and we're big on connectivity. But I think one of the things that's interesting is Juniper shares a similar vision. I think, not to put words in the Metro Ethernet Forum's mouths, great event so far. Actually, I'm very impressed with the event so far. But not to put words in your mouth, but we don't want the network to be an impediment to delivering these ideas. Juniper wants to facilitate the connectivity, and I think that's one of the fundamental building blocks of the Metro Ethernet Forum. How do we standardize this? How do we make it simple to provide connectivity so the network is not an impediment to what we want to do and what we want to dream? So what problem are we solving? This is a website, it's a managed service. It could be any managed service. This could be a dynamic bandwidth service. This happens to be a managed enterprise security service. Whatever that problem, whatever that service is. It's got the information, I'm a consumer, I want to come in, I want to buy this product, that's fine. The thing I want to point out is contact me. Now as a consumer, if I went to Amazon and I said, oh, there's a new thing I want to buy, or I went to eBay and I wanted to buy something and it said contact me, send me a note, I'll let you know, call me up, we'll figure it out. That's not what I expect as a consumer. That's not what I'm looking for. And that's not what we've been trained now as consumers to expect. Fully automated service delivery, that's what we want. And one of the things that goes beyond that is this concept of let's dream big. This is hard stuff. I know it's hard stuff. I mean, some of the presentations we've heard already are about, is the OSS BSS going to drive the network, or is the network going to drive OSS BSS? This is hard. There's a lot of hard problems to solve. But I think if we dream big and we start small and we move quickly, we can get there. So companies that are moving quickly through this, I mean, there's a lot of initiatives out there going on. I think one of the ones that's interesting is what AT&T has rolled out, which they call their user-defined cloud, which is really laying the foundation for a personalized network experience. This is what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to define my own personalized network experience. I think they have a vision. I think we all have that same vision. It's going to take us a long time to get there. And like I said, we don't want the network to be an impediment to this. Juniper just recently made a couple of announcements to try to help us as a community and our customers in the audience and up on stage to accomplish this as well. We've started putting DevOps style hooks into our switches and our routers to make it much easier for you to provision and manage stuff. We rolled out an NFV in a box, a turnkey NFV data center platform to make it easier to get started with it. And then I think one of our boldest moves is we actually virtualized our flagship product, the MX. And so, we were talking about the display downstairs. We're going to, you can come downstairs and take a look at the stand, and we're going to have all our big MXs and all of our big routers and all that sort of stuff. And we're trying to figure out, how are we going to show the future here? How much space do we need to show what's going on? And so I decided to bring an MX with me. That's it. And I think the ability to take heavy-duty routing protocols and all of the stuff, all the connectivity stuff that comes with it, and put it on a USB stick, and have a router in your pocket. And the ability to take it and put it anywhere is going to give us the ability to build these virtualized services to really provide connectivity such that the network just connects. And it just makes all of our dreams, all of our vision, all of our ideas connect. So we have this vision, Juniper has this vision of combining the performance of networking with the agility of cloud. And that's really what we're trying to deliver to the industry as a whole. How do we get the network to be as responsive as the cloud services that we're looking to develop? How do we get it so that that network isn't in the way of what we're trying to accomplish? Thank you very much.
At Tata, and inevitably these sorts of things turn into my network is bigger than yours, as was pointed out earlier, but we have a huge amount of capacity that is being used in a variety of different ways. We have submarine infrastructure. We've got now about 30 terabits of capacity that we have lit on the submarine side of things, fully owned and operated, and then other cable systems. A lot of that is starting to get used by cloud service providers. There's been some studies that you've seen recently where it's been discovered, not too surprisingly to many of us, that every request you put into Facebook, for example, in fact generates 1,000 times as much traffic as it has to correlate information together, bring together your list of friends, images, and all of that sort of thing. It's driving huge amounts of capacity needing to be built up and to support services which are cloud-based, either for consumers or in an enterprise space. So we wanted to understand a little bit about this whole zoo and what enterprises are thinking about in the cloud space. And so this is in fact the results of that survey that we took ourselves. The general thing that's interesting to me is that a lot of us look at cloud deployments and enterprises deploying into cloud environments and think, are people really feeling that they're getting value for money? Is this actually better than what they had before? You hear disaster stories, you hear success stories, and it was kind of nice to get out there, understand what people are doing, understand what their plans are, and understand how successful they feel about it. So we commissioned this study. So you can see here who's actually deployed things into the cloud based on the people that we surveyed. And you can kind of see the breakdown here that it's about kind of 50-50 who's deployed, who's deploying, and then there's the 11% who are taking the risky approach of, I just haven't done anything yet. With refreshing honesty, they've come forth and pointed this out. So that's useful to know. We need to service this market. The things that enterprises tend to use clouds for are not particularly surprising, so hence I've produced them in a very simplified form because there's no point in going into lots of detail about it. The interesting thing that's happened, though, as organizations have started to put more services into the cloud, and according to some studies, this year was the seminal year at which point more than 50% of the world's enterprise workloads have been shifted into the cloud. That might be a bit anticipating the end of this, but it's certainly something that's pretty live. Supporting all of that, cloud service providers have started to talk about direct connectivity and started to deploy direct connectivity, and so we heard from Colt about connections into multiple public cloud service providers. I think there was an unintended consequence when Amazon was the first one to do this with Direct Connect. Suddenly, where previously it had been a domain that you tended to put test dev, shadow IT, those kinds of things, what was ending up in your public cloud environment, by connecting it directly into the enterprise core, suddenly you created an environment that IT was able to control. And with that came a whole series of consequences around control, policy management, security, all of those sorts of things, which I think that the public cloud environment didn't really anticipate. So we see some of these things which are possible to do without security controls, privacy management, and all of that sort of thing. Suddenly when you start talking about storing private data, we know just how much legislation there is currently underway to restrict where you're allowed to put it, where you're allowed to carry it. A lot of people think about data once it's at rest. I've got to keep it within a particular jurisdiction. But also think about that data in motion. I'm doing failover, I'm doing disaster recovery, I'm moving something from my cloud to public cloud. Where is that data going? Who's looking at it? Have I violated any sort of law? This is all in areas that we're very interested in. So deterministic behavior of traffic between data centers is something that we're starting to see a lot of. Deterministic behavior between clouds is something that we're starting to see a lot of. Otherwise, the rest of it's hybrid and all that sort of thing. As soon as you start talking about hybrid cloud, then you're talking about predictable behavior, and you need to, again, look at this deterministic performance between your cloud and whatever other elements you need to tie into it. So we see out of these surveys and talking to enterprises and so on, some of the things that they're finding challenges with this new cloud environment. So global connectivity, customers have got resources that sit in multiple regions. There are multiple legislations they have to comply with. There's connectivity between those different regions that need to be enforced. All these sorts of things are building up to a series of issues that people are only discovering as they move these applications into the cloud and as they take advantage of Direct Connect services. So like Colt and like pretty much every other carrier that you can point out in this room, we have our private connectivity model into public cloud providers. We also have the benefit that a lot of cloud providers buy back-end heavy lifting capacity, multiple hundred gigs. We're now starting to sell N by 400G wavelengths on our submarine network as well. So it's driving huge amounts of capacity, and we have a really good idea of where it's going because we're having to provide a lot of the infrastructure that supports that. The enterprise then needs to consume that capacity, and they're taking 1 gigs and 10 gigs and so on. We have about now somewhere between 500 and 600 gig of capacity connected to various private cloud connections around 15 locations globally. So we have hubs in places like Singapore and Hong Kong and Tokyo and US East Coast, West Coast, and then across Europe to support all of that. So all of this is driving changes in behavior in enterprises. They want to integrate their IT with the cloud IT. They want also not to be locked into particular solutions. So we've put a lot of emphasis around being, if you like, a neutral broker of network-centric services into cloud providers. If customers also want to buy cloud services from us, fantastic, very happy to sell them that. But we understand that no single cloud provider can give you every single solution you need in order to run your business. So we want to enable that connectivity between multiple different public clouds, private clouds, and other arrangements that customers need to have, and a lot of that is based on Ethernet. One last thing I'll say about that, and then I'll things back to the panel. We find that a lot of cloud service providers have got a very evolved model where it comes to extending services into their cloud through private connectivity based on IP. I'm very happy to say that a lot of customers are asking about how layer 2 connectivity can be extended into public cloud environments. Why? Because then that allows the customer to extend their IP environment onto the cloud service provider. They can have their own IP address blocks, they can run their own IP management, they can run their own policy enforcement, they can do all of that sort of thing at layer 3, and the provider is out of the way and operating at layer 2. So one of the things we're pushing very hard with cloud service providers, and I encourage all of you to help me with this task, is to make them look at layer 2 connectivity, and I mean real proper layer 2 connectivity, not emulated layer 2. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James. You did have a slide up there, Steve, and I wanted to go back to that, where you had the service provider initiatives.
Don't do it.
And you highlighted business virtual CPE versus with the virtualized data center, cloud network services.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about the types of initiatives that you're seeing across the industry right now, enabled by SDN and NFV? And then maybe if you guys could comment on kind of how you're leveraging that technology to drive things forward.
A lot of activity around connectivity layer, which I did not cover specifically in there. Then sort of moving up into what I would consider more of the managed services, managed security service, the misnamed virtual CPE. There's still CPE. We're not getting rid of CPE. We're just trying to shift some of the functions that are going on out there. There's certainly a very, very ambitious area that we're seeing a lot of investment and a lot of interest in. I think a lot of our customers, and I would assume the panelists as well, are looking for ways to add value to that connected pipe, right? And then the third is the third stratosphere is bringing in those software as a service applications, being able to connect up with the Salesforces of the world and that sort of thing, and bring all of that together. And I think at these different layers, we're seeing a lot of activity, connectivity, managed services, and then the bringing in the software as a service type companies. Tremendous demand right now for that. And I think there's still a lot of questions out there. How do I manage it? How do I provision it? How do I deploy it? How do I bring it all together under a cohesive umbrella so that I can actually sell this to my customers today?
Yeah, on the virtual CPE side, as you maybe saw on the slide, we were listed there from Juniper that we have deployed and applied already for quite a while, so more than a year now, the virtual CPE for IP services, not only, or it will move on, but let's say there were a lot of expectations on the operational side put into that. We from the marketing product management department were a bit more hesitative to it, but we gave it a try, or we have implemented it, and there will no way back. The point is there are quite simple challenges sometimes, starting from the customer actually is offering, or ordering better saying, a managed CPE service, as it was called in the old days, basically, and he doesn't get one. And he's felt cheated, simply as that. So he's saying, actually, I ordered a CPE from you, and layer 3 CPE, and you don't provide me one. Well, we explain, well, this is all now virtualized. That's your IT applications, for instance, you maybe know from that. But they don't it's not an easy acceptance from the customer that they still pay for the service of a virtualized CPE, but actually don't get one, right? So these are things which are a bit of a challenge you have to deal with, simple as that, and you maybe doesn't recognize them at the beginning. Another one is about a lot of exceptions will happen, because you have your rule set when a virtual CPE can be deployed. But then there are maybe the 10% of functionality, a feature set, configurations which are not able to be supported with that. And this is then, let's say, a challenge that the bottom line operational efficiency still hold. Because when the 10% assumption at the beginning of exceptions turns into a 20, 30, 40%, then, well, the business cases are a bit shaky. But overall, this is the way to go, and we're looking forward for other use cases like firewalls, like application awareness, like the cloud. The cloud connectivity requires really an application awareness functionality, and if we can really virtualize that further into the network core, that's absolutely then a positive thing.
So from our point of view, there are a variety of functions which are sort of layer 3 kind of things which we can safely ignore because we're at a layer 2 conference, so we don't need to worry about any of those kind of things. So yes, obviously we're looking at, we've got a variety of functions that we had traditionally virtualized anyway, and now suddenly it's cool and it's NFV and all of that sort of thing, but actually we've done it for a long time. And continuing down that track, sure. I'm kind of, at least in the context of this conference, I'm more interested in virtualizing layer 2 kind of functionalities, which is more along the lines of, I suppose you could call it traffic engineering as a service. So we find that sophisticated users of data centers and cloud operations wanting to reconfigure topologies of, so we talk a lot about bandwidth and sizing and bursting and all that kind of thing, yawn. Much more interesting topology reconfiguration, application-centric grooming of particular routes, progressive failover into different configurations as in anticipation of a weather event, as opposed to a very rapid reconfiguration because of a failure event. All of those kinds of things, really interesting, very early days for that sort of thing. There's a rush to just go, oh, well, SDN solves all of that. It doesn't actually at all. And certainly you'd never easily be able to give a customer direct access to your SDN environment and to give them the switches to move their traffic around. So how do you create that environment? How do you give it to them? How do you allow them to run their cloud infrastructure dynamically? That I find really interesting, and there's still a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I just would agree with that. Our traditional platform, the NaviCloud Infrastructure as a Service platform, was more the traditional construct, layer 3, virtual server-based, control panel. You can create and manage a server in your traditional fashion. Had a lot of benefits from the comfort that people had in accessing and using that, which led to some accelerated adoption. The new platform we have is a director-based platform. We call it NaviCloud Director. It's SDN-based. To address some of those capabilities, but it does create its own challenges, such as how do you manage a back-end network that we traditionally have? How do you create those hybrid physical, virtual interconnectivities that we traditionally could do over layer 3 in a multi-tenant environment that have much more complications? So we're learning as we go through that, but it does create that layer 2 accessibility of maybe layer 2 over layer 3, but still the layer 2 connectivity. It creates the kind of API enablement. So now that companies are maturing their applications, those applications can now make calls into the environments, to truly have a more elastic and efficient use of the cloud.
Okay. Here's a question I wanted to ask you about accessing the cloud. If we think about all these different cloud options out there and different ways to get to them, one of the things is, do you need multiple links to multiple different service providers? How are people going to be accessing the cloud going forward? We have this direct connect type option, but what are some of the different ways that they'll do that? Matthias, you want to?
Yeah, that's exactly the point. When you're switching over from a public cloud architecture and you're just consuming the cloud IT services from various providers you just need to a private connectivity, then you need to consider indeed, do I need now to have n times connectivities? Do I need to scale them up and need to dimension them separately, independently? Or you are looking for, a solution which integrates the different cloud platforms, the cloud providers, into a single virtualized connectivity. And this is what Colt really sees as the most viable option for a customer, because they don't want to have now the situation that they have virtualized and shared all the IT landscape. At the end, they are ending up with, I don't know, having a multiplied network infrastructure as a result at the end. So no, this needs really to get integrated, and depending on what the customer's infrastructure is currently, so is this a MPLS multi-point service or it is a Ethernet layer 2 transport network, then they would like to have one virtual leg, one virtual connection into the cloud platforms.
Okay. James? Yeah.
Okay. So I think we see very much similar kinds of things. I think that the challenge comes that certain cloud service providers have got mature layer 3 models that are very internet-centric. So Salesforce.com is a good example. It's used by a lot of people. Having predictable performance into that environment, if they're going to make Salesforce an integral part of their business processes, becomes challenging because there's not really a concept of direct connectivity. So you have to essentially fake it by creating another separate autonomous system. You have to essentially do a private peering exercise between that separate AS number and Salesforce. It's not a great solution. There are also various cloud services that don't really have a proper concept of global availability. So everyone in this room has experienced how clever Google can be at chasing you around the planet and making sure that all of your stuff is really close to you as soon as you arrive off the aircraft, which is kind of frightening when you think about it, but it works really, really, really well. And they use tons and tons of capacity to do all of that, and there's very complex engineering that sits behind all of that kind of thing. If you use, again, something, not to pick on Salesforce particularly, but you tend to be associated with a particular instance in a specific region, having that global failover and all of that sort of thing doesn't really work that way. So every cloud service provider's got a different approach to it. The other thing that is attractive about layer 2 connectivity is it's pretty ubiquitous and it's very standardized, thanks in large part to the work of the MEF. If you start looking at the layer 3 implementations that some of these direct connect style services have, there are all kinds of weird and wonderful things. I shouldn't really be naming names, so, but some of them are, you've got natting issues, you've got v4 versus v6 addressing issues, you've got address translation issues, you've got reuse of IP addresses within that cloud, which I have no control over. I just sort of see the mess that falls out at the end of it. And then basically underpinning all of this, you've got a customer's expectation, which is very reasonable and correct, which is, I've bought a VM from some cloud service provider, I've bought connectivity from you, therefore your connectivity goes all the way from me to that VM. But it doesn't, because somewhere in the middle, and it's very hard to tell where exactly, we have to hand over to their infrastructure and then we don't have any visibility of what's happening inside it. So how do you extend OAM into a cloud environment and have a real SLA that is end-to-end? That's the other thing that's pretty difficult.
Yeah, just two things. One is, prior to Time Warner Cable acquisition, we were always agnostic to how the customer came to the data center, to the cloud, right? We'd say bring your own network, essentially, and we would support their preferred access. But clearly there's an interesting opportunity to provide the end-to-end service as a service to a customer. So from their premise to the cloud and back, with one service level commitment that you could deliver to manage the latency of the application as well as the latency within the network. So I think many of us are going along that same pursuit. But I think you hear a lot about agility and in the presentation so far today, both on the network side and on the cloud side. I think there's tremendous opportunity there still as we develop our maturity along creating that kind of agile IT environment so that you can really extract more of the benefit of that integrated and networked, well, stitched together network and cloud service. So I think this year we'll see a lot of advancement as we start to collaborate together, you know, across the service providers and the carrier service providers to figure that out.
Let me just jump in with a quick comment. So I did mention that we released a new product, our virtualized version of our MX. And when I first heard that we were going down this path, I thought, okay, I've got a box, now I've got a software version of that same box. But as I sat and talked with some of our customers and also talked with our engineering groups and our customer care organization and really got input from the field, it became clear that this was really driven out of a demand from our service provider customers, people in the audience, to address the issues that you're talking about. So suppose I want to have multiple connections into a cloud environment and I want to have isolated tenants. Now you can put individual route functions in for each of these different connections. If I need to have connectivity reached into the data center, I can put a router right into that data center that's under my managed control. By virtualizing essentially that one network object, it gives, I think, a whole new level of control to the service provider community to be able to reach out and put that managed service one step closer to their customer, one step closer to that service that's being delivered. And I think we're really going to see a renaissance here in terms of I mean, Juniper, we're a routing company. So a renaissance in routing, fantastic, but really an opportunity to start to push routers into a whole new way to really make it easier to manage these kinds of services that our customers are looking for.
Okay, one last question for you all, and this is related to one of the slides Nan put up. He called it like a personalized service, but I call it like the Connect Me service, okay? I'm here at the hotel, I'm trying to access the cloud, I'm trying to upload documents to the cloud, and I'm getting bogged down because everybody else is all doing it at 5 p.m. I wanted to be able to have that service follow me around so that no matter where I am, I get that promised connection and reliability. James, it's up to you. When are we going to have that type of service?
Well, coincidentally, a week ago, we launched essentially enhanced IP across 30 countries, and about 85% of the world's GDP. So we can actually provide guaranteed performance to 85% of the world's GDP from an internet connection. So you probably weren't intending to give me that particular piece of rope, but I've taken it and I'm very happy about it. But and so then we try and provide a whole range of things. So the great thing about the internet is it's ubiquitous. You don't have to build new connectivity out to these endpoints. We do have to do fancy technology pieces to make sure that that third-party network and our network are aligned and we can properly segregate the traffic and look after it and all that sort of thing. But we're not having to build a parallel instance. We then also provide obviously standard internet connectivity into cloud service providers, and again, because we're the 4th largest ISP in the world, we have direct connections into ludicrously large numbers of cloud service providers. We have 157 interconnects with Google, for example, and so on and so forth. All of that gives a certain level of predictability, and then if you want predictability beyond that, then we have traffic engineered solutions at layer 2 and layer 3. So the idea is to try and make sure that the connectivity you have and your connection into the cloud is as predictable and performance-oriented as possible. And then give the customer the option of how they want to achieve that, and also the flexibility to do different approaches depending on where you are in the world and what exactly you're trying to do. So it's tough. It is not a simple exercise, and every single service provider is a new negotiation. We've said we want to do 100 countries by 2016. I cannot begin to describe how much work that is from an internet connectivity point of view. Private connectivity, pretty well established. As I said, I'd still like to push this layer 2 concept because I think it delivers a better result for the customer who has more complex requirements.
Yeah, we looked at how we could complement our infrastructure as a service offering with other adjacent applications, and we introduced things like backup as a service and storage as a service, DR as a service, et cetera. One of the ones that was interesting to solve this issue was desktop as a service. And so we developed a desktop as a service offering that was very easy to adopt and consume by our customers, and they did embrace that pretty well for specific users or specific use cases, like third-party developers that they didn't want to have with their source code on their laptops, somewhere, those type of things. Or Chromebook. So we offer now on Chromebook a full desktop experience as you tunnel through securely there. It doesn't require a ton of really bandwidth because it's just the experience that you're viewing through that device versus the application sending calls back and forth. So I think those kind of adjacent applications give us a different perspective on how to potentially approach a challenge, such as that.
Very good. Well, thank you very much to the panel. We're out of time.